Hey everyone, welcome to a new video. In this video we are going to see how we can create procedurally interfaces for Macs for live devices. So how we can create interfaces with JavaScript, dynamically or procedurally, and how we can store the status of those interfaces with a preset object, for example, and how we can recall those status using the preset object. For example, I just saved a new preset here and I saved the set, I recreated the device, and I still have all my presets here in the preset object so I can recall them. In this way we can dynamically create complex interfaces. For the moment it's just a multi-slider with a panel behind, and this is a matrix control. But this could be a much more complex interface that you can just create dynamically and save its state here. So that's pretty cool and useful. So without any further ado, let's jump inside this and see how we can do that. So what I'm going to do is to create a new Max audio effect here in Live. Just drop it here, open it. And since I don't really need to work with audio, I'm going to delete all the stuff that is inside. And I'm going to save this patch inside a folder that I just created on my desktop. And I'm going to save the patch, which I called Max for Live GUI Tut. Cool. So the first thing we need is a JS object, since we are going to create our interfaces using JavaScript. So I'm creating a JS and I will call it interface creator.js or something like that. You can call it as you want. Then I'm going to open it and give it auto watch equal 1, so I can then edit it with a custom text editor. And I'm going to save that inside the same patch where the Max for Live device is, so it will find it. And if I double click on the JS object, it will automatically open the code, the JS code inside Visual Studio Code, which is my text editor of choice. Alright, so let's say that we want to create our custom interface, which is going to be like a multi-slider for the moment, which is something pretty useful, and it's perfect to illustrate our case. So I'm going to create a class for our multi-slider because you'll see we are going to add a bunch of methods and properties to it, so it's better to keep everything inside a class. So to this multi-slider class, we need to pass the dispatcher object in order to create objects inside the patcher. Let's, for example, pass also a position for this object, and let's pass like an initial value for the number of sliders. So number of sliders, right? And great, so then let's create some properties for this object. So this P is going to be P, which is going to be the dispatcher object. The dis.pos is going to be equal to the position, and this number of sliders is going to be equal to number of sliders. Okay, great. And then we want to have our multi-slider. So this dot multi-slider user interface is going to be a new, or let's actually call it multi-slider max object, just to be super sure of what we are talking about. And then this is going to be a dsp.new default, and let's just create it at 0, 0, and let's create a multi-slider. Great. And then we basically want to reposition this multi-slider and make it bigger and scale it to our desired size. So let's actually create a new variable, call it this size, and let's give it just some fixed values, like for example 100 pixel width, or maybe 200 pixel width and 60 pixel high. And then we're going to do like this p.script and then sandbox, because we're going to send a message to the multi-slider max object. So this dot multi-slider max object variable name, because we need to refer to this object through its variable name, which actually doesn't exist yet, so we need to give it to the object. patching rectangle. So we're going to define now the patching rectangle of this object, and our patching rectangle is going to be pos0, pos1, so the position that we pass when we create an instance of this class, and then size 0 and size 1. Let's actually go on a new line with that, right? Size 0 and size 1. So this is the size that we decided here. Actually, we need to give a var name to this object, so let's give it, let's call it dot var name. Let's call it something like multi-slider. And if we have more of them, Max will automatically put like a increasing number after this underscore. Cool. And let's then create a function to actually destroy this object. So this.destroy, it's going to be a function. This is a method of this class, and what it's gonna do, it's gonna, this p, so this patcher is going to remove this multi-slider max object. Awesome. Oh, I have a typo here. It's patching, right? And okay, so this is it for the moment, I think. Let's create a public function now. Let's put it here. Public functions, which means functions we can access from Max. And let's say create a multi-slider. And we are going to create a multi-slider. Let's actually pass a position from our patch. So position X, position Y. Let's actually create a global variable containing an array of multi-sliders. So multi-slider array. I prepend it with a G to signify that this is a global variable. And then here, let's go like this, G multi-slider.push a new multi-slider to which we have to pass this patcher as P. The position is going to be an array with pos X and pos Y. So you can see here we defined it as an array. And then the number of sliders, let's say that we want to have 10 sliders, fixed number. Great, so let's now give it a try. So let's create this message, create multi-slider at like 10, 10. See what happens. Nothing happens. Let's see if we get... Oh, I think I just misspelled it actually. So it's multi-slider. And there we go, but we got an error, size is not defined, line 13. And that's just because I stupidly forgot to put the this keyword. So it didn't know what we are referring to with this, with size. Pos would work because it's a variable that is actually input inside the function at this moment, but size didn't know what it is. So, all right, let's try it again. And cool, here is our multi-slider, but I forgot to set the number of sliders for the multi-slider object. So let's actually delete it manually. Let's go inside the JavaScript. And what we need to do is to say that this multi-slider max opt size, which is an attribute of the multi-slider object, is equal to this nos. So we set it to this number of sliders. And let's try it again. And there we go. Now we got 10 sliders. Okay, great. Let's actually define inside the JavaScript a function to delete all the user interface. So let's call it delete UI. And what it's going to do, it's like for variable e, actually let's say for index in G multi-slider array, what we're going to do is to say G multi-sliders array index dot destroy. And then, so this is going to delete all the multi-sliders we created, and then we're just going to set the G multi-slider array to an empty array. So this is going to clean everything. Let's create this function now in Max. So if I create this multi-slider and then I create another one, and then I can delete them all like this. Okay, cool. let's create another message to create a new multi-slider, like on the right of the other. So I just do this. Oh, to view, I should put it somewhere here, which is around 220. So let's place it at 220. All right. So we now have two multi-sliders. Let's do these. Actually, let's put these messages on our visible part of our device. So we could put the multi-sliders under the messages. So let's create a sender and send these messages to JavaScript. Let's create a sender, call it to JS, and here to JS, a receiver. Right. And we want to create them around epsilon position of around 100. So let's see if this works. So delete them all, create one, create a second. Okay, great. So let's take a look at how our device is looking at the moment. Oh, what I've done is that I've saved the patch with the multi-sliders in it. So now they are part of the patch. So this will not work. So let's try this now. Oh, we can, as you can see, the device is too small to contain all the multi-sliders. So let's actually open it again. Let's place our JavaScript object somewhere here so we have enough space, right? So create one, create two, we can mess around with them. Okay, great, and then we can delete them. But what's the problem here? The problem is that if I now delete, if I even save the set and delete this multi-slider, if I'm going to recreate it, I have no way to recall whatever was inside the patcher. And it could be that my interface was very complex and there was a lot of stuff going on and it doesn't get saved with the device because these are objects created procedurally, they're not saved within the patch. So they will not be saved when the set is saved in live, right? So in order to fix that, we need to work a bit. And what we need to do is to use a path storage object. And let's give it a name like UI storage or something. And let's also give it save mode 0, which means it's going to save. So how path storage works in live is that it's going to save the JSON with all the data together with the device. So we don't need to actually save it manually to an external file. This is why we give it save mode 0 attribute. And then we need to create a path object, and let's give it a name like JS UI or something. And we connect it to its central output to the JS object. So now the JS is now part of the path storage saving system. Pretty cool. Let's now create a preset object, which we will use in conjunction with path storage. Let's give it as path storage attribute the name of our storage, so we call it UI storage. And let's actually load bang that. So as soon as we open the patch, this preset gets connected with path storage. And then what we need to do in order for the path storage to save the preset when the live set is saved, we need to go inside this inspector and set the attributes parameter mode enable here. And I think this is going to be it. Let's see then if we have more options to set. We will see it later. Great. But this doesn't bring us much far as yet. Because what we need to do now is to create a couple of functions inside our JavaScript file. And those functions are automatically called by Max every time we recall a preset with a preset object when there is a path object connected to the JS object. So these two functions are function get value of, so let me actually write this down, automatically called by Max with the path object. So get value of, that's one function, and the second function is a set value of. So these functions work with dictionaries. So the set value of gets automatically passed the dictionary of the path storage object, so the dictionary which is saved by the path storage object. We need to write into that dictionary with the inside the set value of function, and then with the get value of function we can recall the data from this dictionary and use it to set our objects that we create procedurally inside JavaScript. So that's pretty cool. So inside the get value of the function, what we want to do is to create a new dictionary, which we are going to call saveDict. So this is a new dictionary, right? And then we want to write some data inside it. So we can do like this, saveDict.replace. And for example, we could want to save the position of those objects. Now, actually, you know what we want to do best is to write a save function inside our class. So this save2dict, for example, inside our multi-slider class is going to be a function to which we pass our save dictionary, so the dictionary which we're going to store all our data. And now what we're going to do inside here is to say saveDict replace. You know what? In order to identify this multi-slider differentiated from the others, we should pass as well an index inside it. So our first variable that we pass inside this class is going to be the index of this multi-slider. So when we create them, let's create a global function and let's call it index and set it to 0. So we pass this as a variable when we create a new multi-slider, and then we increment it every time. So every one of these multi-slider now has a different index. So in this way we can identify them. Let's actually call it, instead of index, like number of multi-sliders or something, right? This is a bit more clear. Great, so this is going to do the same thing though. It's just going to be an incremental number that is different for every multi-slider, so great. So what we're going to do then when we replace, when we save the data in the dictionary, we say multi-slider, for example, plus this index. And then we have to use this JS function, which is called JSON stringify, which basically transforms the data that we pass it to a JSON string. And then we could, for example, pass this position as a data. Oh, so actually we should say this multi-slider, this index plus pos, so we know this is the position. We are saving the position for this object. Cool, so inside our get value of the function, we are just going to create again another for loop that iterates through our multi-sliders array. So what we're going to do is to say save2dict to call the function we just created, and we pass inside the save dictionary. Great. Then inside the set value of, we are going to do the same thing, but instead of saying save2dict, we are going to call a function which we are going to call load from dict, and we pass inside the dictionary, which is automatically given to the set value of function by max. It's automatically passed by max to this function. So let's create now this function inside JavaScript, inside our class. So inside a multi-slider class, this load from dict equal function, and this is going to be our dictionary. And what we're going to do is, let's actually create a function here to set the position of our multi-slider. So set rect, something like that we can just call it. It's going to be a function in which basically we do what we did here. We just copied that, in fact, and we passed it here. So we're going to send the patching rect to our multi-slider, and this is going to set its position and size. So we need to actually pass inside the position, right? And in fact, we don't want to use this pos, but actually the new position, right? That's the sense of this function. Great, so inside load from dict, what we want to do is to get the data from the dictionary. So var pos, so this is going to be the new pos. which we can get using the JSON parse function this time, which transforms a JSON string to actual JavaScript data. And we need to say the dit, get, and then the name of our multi-slider parameter, which we call multi-slider plus this index pos. Right. What have I done? This should be okay. Good. And then we want to say this set rect using the new position. All right. So I'm pretty excited to see if this actually works. I'm pretty confident this will not work, but you never know. So let's actually give it a try. So what I'm going to do is to create a bunch of multi-sliders. For the moment, the value of the sliders is not gonna be saved, this we didn't see yet. I'm going to save here. Okay, it didn't complain yet. So I'm going to just put those two multi-sliders in a random position, and then I'm trying to recall the preset, but it's not working. Oh, it doesn't work because what I forgot to do is that in the get value of function, we need to return this dictionary, because so Max can know that we save data inside this dictionary. All right, so I just added the return save dict to the get value of function. So let's actually try again, and I'm going to save that. Oh, okay, it's working crazy. Okay, I really didn't expect this to work, I have to admit that. But awesome, it's working. So every time we can recall this preset and it's going to work. Now, let's say that we don't have these two objects, but we have a preset in which these two objects are placed in that position. So what we want to do inside the set value of the function, we want to say that if the length, actually g multi-slider array dot length is equal to 0, then what we want to do is to basically we want to create from scratch our multi-sliders objects. So you know what, we should save inside our dictionary the number of sliders we got, so we can always know what is the number of sliders from the dictionary, and then we can use this number to recreate them in case the number is different from what is saved inside the preset. So here, after this, we can save dict.replace, and then we say number of sliders, and then we use the JSON.stringify function to save inside here the number of multi-sliders. Oh, I forgot to put a comma here. Great. And so what we need to do here is to create our multi-sliders. So inside our set value of function now, we have to set the number of sliders to be equal to json.parse dict.get and then number of sliders. All right, that's going to be the number of sliders. So if a multi-slider array length is actually different than g number of sliders, number of multi-sliders, what we want to do is to first delete all the multi-sliders, so we don't have any discrepancy between the sliders inside our array and the sliders that actually exist and the sliders that are saved inside the preset. So what we want to do is to actually call the delete UI function. So, right? So if this number is different, we're going to delete UI. And then we are going to recreate the multi-sliders. So for var e equal to 0, e less than g number of multi-sliders, e plus plus, and then we're going to create a new multi-slider, push it inside a multi-slider array right here. And what we want to do, we cannot really pass the number of multi-sliders as an index, although actually we can. No, so we can actually create a new variable. This time let's call it index, and let's say pass it index here, and then increment this index every time we create a new multi-slider. Great. So this should work. And cool, so let's give it a try. Now I create my two multi-sliders, save these as a preset, I delete them, and now I try to recall this preset. Oh, and it's giving me an error because I forgot, of course, to set the position. We should set it to something, although after that we are actually going to load from dict, so we are actually going to set the position here. So this is just to create them, so we can just set an initial position of 0, 0, because anyway we're going to set the position here. Set the position from the dict for each multi-slider, right? So inside here, let's give it a try. I save these again, I delete them, I try, and look, if we just recall this preset, we can see that the sliders get automatically created and also positioned. And this works also if we don't, if we already have two multi-sliders, they will automatically get created. Okay, awesome. Now what we need to do is to find a way to store the actual values of the sliders as we set it with the mouse. Cool. So let's go inside here. And in order to do that, we need to attach a listener, a max object listener, on which I have a video about, link in the description. We need to use this object to know when the values of the sliders are changed. So let's go here. Before we start defining our function, and say this object listener, it's equal to a new max object listener. This is a max class inside JavaScript, which will listen to this multi-slider max option. Then we need to attach a callback function to that. Now I'm going to define a callback function right inside the class. So I call it slider callback or something. Capital S, and this is going to be equal to a function, but I'm going to wrap this whole function thing. I'm going to wrap this function thing into parentheses, so then I can use the bind statement. This is a JavaScript thing to bind these, the these of this function to this class. So whatever we access inside the class, inside this function with the this keyword is going to refer to the these of this class. And this is useful if we want to modify from the callback some properties of this class. All right, so let's see if we're going to need that. Yeah, we're actually going to need that, I think, because we have another property of this class, which we will call values. And we set this to null. And then these values, we set it inside a callback. And the callback gets the data from the object, or we can call it data. And this data as a property, yes, data object as a property, which is called value, which is basically, it's going to give us all the values of the sliders of the multi-slider object as an array. If we want to post that to the console, we can see what we are receiving here. So we can say post these values plus, let's go on a new line. Right. And okay, so this should work. Let's give it a try. Let's create the new multi-slider, and as you can see, it's giving us here the values of the sliders as soon as they get modified. Okay, so this is pretty cool. And what we want to do here, let's delete this post statement. What we want to do here now, inside the save to dict, we want to create a new line here and replace multi-slider plus this index, and then instead of pos, instead of the position of this object, we now want to get the values, and then we're going to stringify these values. Great. Now when we load the dict, we actually want to get the values, so multi-slider plus index instead of post, now the values, and now we want to set the values for the multi-slider object, and this we can do with sending a message to our multi-slider, which is, so we say multi-slider message and then set list. This is a message for the multi-slider object. You can check. If you check the multi-slider object, you can see that it has this message. If we go in the reference, it's called the set. It's called the set list, and we'll set the object to a list you send it. So set list, and we set it to values. And then we also actually want to set these values equal to values. We should make a function just to set the values, but it's not super important. Actually, inside this rect, we should say then that this pos is equal to pos. Right. This should be it. So let's give it a try and let's modify a bunch of values. Going to save a new preset. Going to delete the UI. Oops, I saved the JavaScript, so it will not work. Okay, so I had to create a new one. Move a bit the sliders. Delete the UI, recreate the object, and as you can see, now the preset is working and recalling the object values, the object of the values of the sliders. Cool, and as you can see, when I call the preset one, where there are two objects, it's going to give me both of them, but the second preset there is only one object, so it's just giving me a single multi-slider, because in this preset we only had, as a number of sliders, we only had one. Okay, cool. So let's delete everything, let's save the patch, and let's go inside our Max for Live. And why there is a multi-slider there? It's probably a bug somewhere. Okay, seems there is a bug somewhere, which creates automatically multi-sliders at startup. But as you can see, this is actually working. So if I save that, destroy the object. Oh, it's funny that it actually creates multi-sliders at startup. Okay, so let's fix this bug. And let's see, why is this happening? You know why this is happening? Because it's calling the set value of at startup. And so when the patch is loaded, this is doing this automatically, I think. So I think there is a way to avoid that, which, so in the path storage object, I think this is an attribute of the path storage object. So we have to go inside this inspector and say stored only. This is actually good. Maybe something with the path object. If we enable parameter mode, it has parameter visibility automated and stored. Let's say that we want it stored only. And this doesn't help us because every time we save, it's going to create those, right? So if I delete the device, recreate it. Oh, no, now it works. So I think it was, yes, this attribute of saying stored only instead of automated and stored, because in that way it's going to actually to recall the last preset that he had, that the path object had. So I'm seeing there is another bug, because if I just okay, you know what, we should set actually the values of the object not to null. We should set these values not to null but actually to an array, and then we should initialize that with the number of sliders. So let's do like this: for var e equal to 0, e less than number of sliders, e plus plus, and then we should say these values dot push 0. Exactly, because we're just going to create an array that has as many zeros as the number of sliders. So I think this is going to initialize our values with our multi-sliders with 0. So since I now saved the JavaScript, I think I need to reopen and close the object. All right, so let's give it a try. Let's say I want to delete everything, and I'm saving this as a new preset. And no, this doesn't really work. Oh, you know what I think is a problem? That we are not resetting the number of sliders when we delete UI. So the whole dictionary, I think it's messed up. So when we delete the UI, yeah, we should set this back to 0. right? Otherwise it's going to be a mess. And right, so I'm going to save here. I think we need to delete all the presets because they are all kind of now corrupted. So, okay, let's give it a try now. If I create those and give it some values and save them, and then I delete them, create just one here and save it as 2. Oh no, there's a big mistake I made actually, which is to set this number of multi-slider to 0, because then when we call delete UI here, this is actually setting this number to 0, which is then messing it up. So this is very dumb. So what we need to do is to actually, I think we will do like this, create a new parameter here, call it num of sliders or something like that. I used a bunch of debug printing stuff just to check if everything was working, and this helped me actually to debug the problem. So what we're going to do is to say if this is different than number of sliders. Now delete UI will set the number of multi-slider to 0. So what we can do here is to just increase then the number of multi-sliders and use that as well. Instead of this index variable that we created, we can actually just use this number of multi-sliders. And this should maybe work. Let's give it a try. And yes, this is working. So let's create another multi-slider, give it some values, save it as a new preset, and this seems to work. So delete everything, close here. Let's go in our device. Let's try to recall some presets, and cool, it seems to be working. Awesome. So we managed to create procedural UI, save its status, and this is just really just scratching the surface, right, guys? Because we could create super complex surfaces, we could create B-patchers that all spawn with different characteristics, and which is basically what I'm doing inside my device. And these can be done through these path storage and path thing, which is super cool in relation to JS, and these two functions that I show you, this set value of and get value of. This is basically where all the juice is made, I guess. This is how you say. Cool. So I hope this was clear enough, not too confusing. If you have some questions, you can of course ask them here on YouTube or on the Max Discord, or if you want to really grab my attention, you can subscribe to my Patreon and join the Discord of my channel. And this is the place that I check the most. Basically, I'm always there. Any case, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Ciao.